population, we need to ensure that everybody is busy. People are busy doing something. We are adding value. We are not just producing primary commodities. We are also adding value. So that way we'll get employment. That way everybody will be busy. That way we'll reduce the level of poverty in the economy. So this is my take.
Thank you very much, Prof. Professor Adeni is also here. Prof has touched on domestic manufacturing, and perhaps, developing value chains along the lines of our mineral resources as well in the solid mineral sector, and perhaps also, to a reasonable extent, making sure that, we have capacity domestically to, add value to those materials as well as improve our productivity. What are your comments on this? And perhaps specifically, you might look at some sectors that tickle your fancy if we are to begin to really, realize our potentials that we've advertised for 63 years.
Yeah, very important analysis, no doubt, considering the fact that we've been a monocultural economy for 63 years, and nearly half of those times we've also been concerned about diversification. But what have we done in concrete terms, to bring this about? How serious are we, in the direction of expanding our income base, considering our potentials, which has been rightly highlighted in agriculture, in solid minerals, and of course, even in tourism. What have we done? Of course, we know that we may not necessarily be talking about tourism now because of questions of insecurity. But what about solid minerals? Of course, opportunities are bound in that area. Agriculture too, still opportunities are still there, are plenty. But beyond all of this is for us to also be concerned about the value, the kind of value that we exhibit as citizens, our kind of orientation towards nation building, towards what is can be associated as our collective property, our Nigerianness. What kind of value are we bringing to the table? This is an intangible that can rub off on all the physical elements that we are highlighting, be it the economy, be it politics, be it culture. If we do not have faith in the system, it becomes a problem for the physical aspects to manifest, to progress, as the case could be. Our attitude to nation building as citizens is still problematic. We have little or no faith, and that's why we can see it dovetailing into failures failures to ensure, to guarantee transparency, accountability in public expenditure process, and in the attitude towards public resources. Yes, we're talking about strengthening the economy. Yes, we're talking about expanding our resource base. But what do we do with these resources afterwards? Most of the time, we unfortunately fritter away these resources, and in frittering them in a way, we're taking them to economies that are far stronger than our own. Trusting only in luxuriation, trusting only in pleasure making, at the expense of sustainable economic endeavors. They'll probably help generations that will come after us, including our own, including the present generation as well. So these things have to be looked at, from a holistic point of view. Remember, I said it's okay for us to focus on the physical, the tangible, but in focusing on these tangibles, we also have to be mindful of the intangible. Because progress doesn't come only by looking at items that you can consider mechanical. Items that are out there alone. The mind also matter. How do we reorient our minds, towards trusting in our collectivity, in a nation called Nigeria. For now, arguments have been made that we are still a nation state. We can hardly call ourselves a nation. Yes, we have nations within this nation state. Sometimes we mistake this for ethnic nationality. We have plenty of nations, no doubt. Sometimes people also mistake it for ethnicities. And that's why we say, okay, it's a nation state, and not yet a nation. But how do we transfer? How do we move from just being a nation state to nation? What the element that matters more in the construction of nation is actually, which is the attitude towards the entity called Nigeria, as the case could be.
All right, Professor Ango, if you can hear us, the latest intervention by Professor Biodun Adeni is speaking about the intangibles, and perhaps one looks at some of the, guiding principles of democracy. You say government for the people. Have we been able to connect with the people over time? Yes, the President, aptly touched on, 7 consecutive governments, in terms of electoral cycles, without interruption and all that. But when we look at, connecting with the people themselves, are we getting the buy-in of the Nigerian? The last administration actually saw something that was a little bit bizarre in the fact that you provide critical infrastructure like rail lines, and then tracks are being removed by the citizens themselves when you provide critical infrastructure, and then you see such, response from those who are supposed to be the receivers, and, people should be jubilating over the provision of some of these amenities. What are your comments on this at this time, and how do we now connect to with the people so that there's a complete buy-in in these projects?
What we need basically is a situation. What we have is a situation whereby the gap is so much. In Nigeria, as we have the top rich that are there, and those that are poor are so many. So that means basically we have a wide gap. We don't have the middle class anymore. So that also brings us to the point whereby we have a high volume of or number of or incidents of poverty as we have in the country. So the implication, of course, is that while the political class, especially those with positions in either executive or legislature, are seen to be doing very well, they are swimming literally in money, those who are downtrodden, who are at the bottom of the ladder, are actually very poor. People are not being able to, like it's been said, afford $1 a day, on the average. So with that kind of margin, with that kind of widespread disparity, what we need in this country is to close the gap. Whatever we need. That is why we need to create more employment. We need people to be busy. We need everybody to be producing something for the economy. But at the same time, our political class have to sacrifice. They have to sacrifice some of their, reduce some of their comforts. For example, when the government at the beginning wanted to bring out some palliatives, and they sent a bill, this particular government, for maybe some expenditure that require to be paid just to take to take care of the increase in prices and things like that happened after removal of subsidy. Unfortunately, the legislature was seen to have added their own, about 70 billion. That was a bit insensitive. And part of that, of course, was for welfare and for vehicles, for operations and things like that. In a country where the poor are so poor that some cannot afford, 3 square meals, many cannot afford even two meals. In fact, we have reached a point at some point when even a meal was a challenge for some people. So what we need is to reduce the expenditure, the cost of governance. Those in government should sacrifice. They should see themselves as having had the opportunity, the privilege, having been selected by Nigerians. Of course, Nigerians have decided, from given all the length of democratic experience we have had now, Nigerians obviously have decided that they prefer democracy to any system of government. But those at the helm of affairs, should ensure that they actually minimize, whatever it is, their penchant for spending money, at the detriment of society. A lot of expenditure should be brought down, so that it will benefit a greater number of Nigerians. And I think that is what we need, to reduce. Even if it means, for example, changing our political system from what it is, which is the presidential system, which everybody said is so expensive, to a parliamentary system, which will reduce the expenditure. I think we need to do whatever it is, that will reduce the cost of governance, and therefore probably make more money available, to the downtrodden, to the poor, and then try to close the gap, between the rich and the poor, which is what we have now in the country.
Thank you, Prof. While we were speaking, another professor came in. Professor Sadiq Abba is the former Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration, University of Abuja. Thank you for joining us, an expert in political science and international relations.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria, and happy independence anniversary.
Yes, let me quickly ask you, your thoughts on a day like this. 63 steps towards nationhood. I've asked my, guests who came in earlier, what are your thoughts at this time? I'm not sure, I'm sure you were perhaps a young boy too when all this started.
I was not even born.
Oh, so, but what are your thoughts at this time?
First and foremost, I should congratulate Nigerians for coming this far. Also, to at least build up the hopes that started 1st October 1960 during Independence Day. We are still on that particular journey of hope. We now recruiting as a renewed hope. Slogans, grammatical, gymnastics, etc. But as a whole, I think we should celebrate Nigeria for the journey so far. Not Nigeria as a successful, or rather we have reached the El Dorado. No. I think so far so good. We made a lot of mistakes in the past. We are still making some avoidable mistakes in the present, but there is still hope in the future. If Nigerians collectively, not leadership, not followership, collectively are willing, ready, and to move forward. Because as it is today, a lot of things, a lot of people are dragging Nigeria backward, both from the upper class and from the lower class. And it is foolhardy at this juncture to blame the entire framework of Nigerians' failure on the doorstep of the elites alone. We have had so much years of blaming the elites without pushing the searchlight on the realities that is now operating at the lower level of the Nigerian society, which is the followership. My major concern for the past few years is that whether to agree in Nigeria we really have leaders, and whether also to accept that we have citizens. To me, the closest we can ever come across is we have rulers in Nigeria, and the best we can describe Nigerians certainly not as citizens, but as followers. So in between these two great extremes lies a lot of possibilities in the middle. And it is these possibilities that we pray and hope that either through providence or through conscious efforts by Nigerians, that responsible leaders will come and fill the gaps and limitations within that particular two extreme poles that are pulling Nigeria apart. So to me, as of yesterday, I look forward to today, that today is an Independence Day. Am I to celebrate? Am I to sit and lament? Should I join the bandwagon of people who condemned and recondemned the past mistakes? Or should I be among the Nigerians that are looking forward with hopes and expectations positively with solutions to our problems? I think, I may be wrong, I think our major problem in Nigeria, we manage problems. We don't solve our problems. We manage it. And problems are not meant to be managed. Those who manage problems are on the express of national disasters. But those who take time, patiently and courageously to solve problems, then they set the pendulum of a nation towards progress, peace, stability, integration, unity, and development. So I think today we should move, despite all the limitations and gaps in our national history. I think if you take 63 years in the life of a nation is so short. To a lot of countries that we now model, or we now look up to, or we now celebrate globally, spend more than 63 years to be where they are. So must we follow their mistakes to develop beyond 63 years? No. But should we condemn ourselves that up to now we are where we are? Yes, of course, but to some extent, I think there are some glitters of hope. There are some measure of success stories that we are closing our eyes on. And it is this measure of little success stories that we are closing our eyes on that we should concentrate. then the big question is that why shall we be in the future? This is why I think we should focus our attention.
All right, Prof. Adeni, you listened to Professor Abba and his early thoughts on Nigeria at 63, and he mentioned some things. He was talking about perhaps deliberately having a system to get in the very best of us in positions where we can steer the ship of state in the right direction, or perhaps relying on providence. But you are professors, so perhaps providence is a bit chancy. So perhaps if we look at our processes generally within the parties, in the schools, perhaps looking for the best versions of ourselves, the best Nigerians, to occupy positions where they can drive, the dreams of the founding fathers. How do we ensure that we get the best of us in positions where they can really make a telling contribution? As it is, this is what perhaps Prof is trying to touch on, in a situation where we have people with imagination to bridge this gap between what he has captioned rulers and followers. Get the citizens into the system, get proper leadership, sensitive leadership at all levels, subnational and federal, to begin to drive the processes to stimulate our growth and development.
Thank you. I think it's still our bane, really, that we are not too concerned about the quality of people that will get into positions of authority. Most of the time, quality appointments are guided by loyalty, patrimonial considerations, and of course, maybe the quality of contribution or the level of contribution that the person will have made to a political process, or even the service the person will probably have made to a particular candidate who is making the appointment. Merit hardly counts, and it's actually a problem, even though we're not saying that loyalty, patrimony shouldn't be a factor. Sometimes you may look at it and say, okay, I trust this person much more than this person, even though he's less qualified, let me consider him for one or two positions. But when we're talking about central critical positions, positions that affect the generality of the populace, you need some level of expertise and understanding. Because if you look at nations around the world that have actually made it, you cannot undermine the place of expertise. Lee Kuan Yew was deliberate about those, who man critical positions in Singapore. Many of them, schooled in high Ivy League institutions in the West. And of course, we know the pattern in Western societies where they do not joke with quality. China, where China was rising, they were mindful of expertise. I've said it severally. The statistics once showed that at least 100,000 Chinese nationals were often in the United States on a yearly basis, going to Ivy League institutions, honing their skills and returning to China, which means that expertise matters. And at the same time, more than 50,000 of them were once seen in European universities on an annual basis. And they were honing their skills. The essence was to go and hone their skills and return home. Skills matter. You cannot toy with it. We need to be mindful of that. And think away from just patrimony or consideration on the basis of primordial sentiments. And the other thing that also bother me sometimes is that the average Nigerian knows the problem with this country. We know. Everybody knows, But again, look at corruption, for instance. There's nobody that does not know that Nigeria is troubled with the corruption plague, with the corruption malaise. But sometimes the Nigerian that is participating in the act is also complaining that corruption is going to kill this country, but at the same time is helping to perpetrate it. So nobody is ready to bail the cat. We're not seeing anybody, until maybe we have seen quite just a minor, just a few that has come like the angels visit, but the majority of citizens are very reluctant to trigger change, to bail the cat, and of course, because of this, we are seeing a cycle of malaise repeating itself now and again. But until I imagine that until this cycle is broken, before we can begin to make some progress in this respect. We are conscious, no doubt. Yes, we have power elite, we have economic elite, and of course, you cannot toy with their consciousness. They are very, very exposed. Oftentimes, we refer to how people travel abroad. They see how things are done correctly, but the challenge is replicating the experiences that we gain from outside the shores of this country, back home. So why are we witnessing these disconnects, between our experience and our ability to replicate it? If you look at this private sector, for instance, sections of the private sector are much more functional, much more productive and efficient than the public sector because they know that they have an objective, which is profit making. So why is the public sector failing? It's just a matter of attitude, which I referred to earlier, which I also describe as an intangible. It's about attitude. It's about change management, attitudinal change management, which can be effected, or which can be, we can change the narrative. If there's behavior to some extent, behavior change communication, a concentration on, reorientation, letting us know that we have a role to play as individuals, not just for those who are in government or those who are in public service or in the civil service, but the average citizen that will have a role to play. But sometimes citizens may not even know. You've got to remind them of their responsibility. And in reminding them, government has a role to play in this regard too, through sensitization, so that they will not take things for granted. Complaining every day will not solve the problem. But somebody has said it earlier on here, it's not just about complaining. We've got to take action. It's not about identifying the problem. We have to move towards solutions and be courageous about it.
All right, in terms of courage, it's both sides. The leadership at the moment has taken some bold decisions, but we'll come to that in the course of the program. Those decisions and, of course, the far-reaching effect on the populace as well, and perhaps where we need to tighten our belts as well in terms of public expenditure. Let's quickly go back to Kano. Kano is not, I understand Kano is not there at the moment, so we'll just put in discuss in proper perspective by taking a report by Mia Ogidi on the evolution of Nigeria since 1960, and perhaps that will whet our appetite to further discuss some of the lingering challenges and how to surmount them.
(1960), a long walk to independence, the birth of a country, excitement on the air, initial steps by the founding fathers give ray of hope to the Nigerian child. Another great chapter emerged in 1963. Nigeria now a republic. But the joy of the civilian child succumbed to military rule after a bloody coup d'etat in 1966. Then a separatist movement formed the Republic of Biafra in 1967, leading to the 3-year Nigerian Civil War. The sweet bitter taste of self-governance flooding the land. The guns paved way for the ballot once again. Nigeria became a republic after a new constitution was written in 1979.
I want us to unite in this effort. I want us to realize that we all belong to the same family, and we just cannot succeed if we are divided. We must not allow ourselves to be divided.
Civil rule short-lived again. The military in 1984 became landlord for another 15 years until the dictatorship era of Sani Abacha was overthrown by death. Bringing in Abu Salami Abubakar to midwife the country to another era of civilian rule in 1999.
Olusegun Obasanjo.
From prison to presidential villa, Obasanjo elected president. OBJ was sustained civilian rule. After 8 years, Obasanjo handed over to Yaradua, whose reign was terminated by death again, bringing in the doctrine of necessity to the country's political dictionary, and this favored the second-in-command, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. Power is transient, and the constitution sacrosanct. In 2015, the unprecedented presented itself. A sitting president, Goodluck Jonathan, dislodged by President Buhari of the APC through the ballot.
Hand over the reins of government, I believe that our nation is secure, our democracy is stable, and the future is bright.
You have earned yourself a place in our history for stabilizing this system of multi-party democratic system.
Another successful 8 years journey for President Buhari. Not just for President Buhari, but the APC, as the party retained power in another contest in 2023. And here is the new commander-in-chief.
Our destiny as a people and a nation depend on our ability to share the artificial restrictions of bias and prejudice so that we live fully onto our democratic creed, that no one is innately superior or entitled to greater rights and opportunities than any other Nigerian.
63 years with 17 leaders, one civil war, but united by a common cause for a greater Nigeria, as INEC not relenting in pioneering new innovations for more credible electoral process in the country.
Thank you, Mayor Ogidi, for that report. Mayor's report moves us to our processes in terms of our political processes. We've seen, successive governments since 1999, from one to the other. Have we started, let me take a prof of political science, because this is your field, perhaps even some of us are in their master's and doctorate efforts. Are we maturing politically? First, from the internal party processes and the leadership recruitment processes, to make sure that we get the best of us in key positions.
You see, in terms of political maturity, I think we are maturing, but we can give ourselves some pass marks. But in terms of political accountability and service delivery, we are, I think, retrogressing far beyond our standard before even colonialism, or not even before independence. So that's the contradiction that is facing Nigeria today politically. We had successful political systems before our encounter with the white men, before that is colonialism. And our over 100 and few years experience under colonialism destroyed and decimated those particular political systems and replaced them with Western political system. Now, from 1999 to date, we were able to establish and enshrine a democratic system of governance. Now, the question is this: can we, by all standards, measure our success stories from the point of view of consistency and continuity in periodic elections and changing of government politically as a success story, as a sign of maturity? Or should we, on the other side, use political accountability and performance or service delivery, which is popularly called in Nigeria as dividends of democracy, as the yardstick that we can measure the success or the journey so far and our political maturity? So if you take these two perspectives, you'll be able to appreciate the fact that in terms of political maturity, yes, there is more political education, political information, and political enlightenment between and across and among Nigerians. But on the other side also, the level and the level of voter education is very low in Nigeria, because up till today, primordialism is the only driving force as far as our voter education is concerned. No, an average Nigerian, irrespective of his own education status, usually go to the ballot box, not with the intention of voting a competent person with capacity and ability, who understands the problems of the society, and who, by all look of things, based on the various factors on ground, or various realities on ground, that he or she has the capacity to solve those problems. It is my tribe, my ethnicity, my religion, my sections that defines who he or she should vote on at the ballot box. So in that particular discipline, we are not maturing. That's number one. And on the leadership selection processes, I think Nigeria is having less than 10% over 100. Because why did I say so? A few years back, I had the opportunity, myself and one Professor Dele Babalola, who is now in UK, were given the opportunity by a foreign agency to now understudy Nigerian political parties on their leadership selection process. And we were so devastated with the result that we found, that 95% of all Nigerian political parties candidate selection process, which we call party primaries or internal party democracy in Nigeria, is less than 10%. So there is no miracle you can do. Now,
when you say less than 10% in terms of, the transparency of the process?
Yes, allowing the process to take its course. Allowing, that is, in each political party to have internal party democracy, in each political party, party primaries, by the rules of the books, either their constitutions, their manifestos, their party guidelines, INEC guidelines, constitutional guidelines, etc., or electoral act. So these are some of the processes or methodologies that they must pass through. So if you now put them on the scale, measuring scale, you find that all Nigerian political parties perform less than 10% in that action. So there is no miracle you can do for competent leaders to emerge through this process. It usually goes to the highest bidder. It usually goes to the very few selected, quote unquote, elites. So it is like a political conundrum that head you lose, tail you lose. So but we are maturing in terms of political maturity, but we are diminishing in terms of political accountability and political system service delivery in Nigeria. And it all boils down to the value. You see, to be sincere and to be honest, leadership, the way we take leadership in Nigeria, will hardly make it right. Because leadership is a very serious business. You cannot achieve leadership through accidents of history or incidents of happenstances in your society. Nations must take leadership seriously. If a nation wants to succeed, wants to achieve economic growth and development, wants to achieve prosperity, wants to achieve civilization, such a nation must go back to the drawing board and define from its own national values, national history, and national culture. This is where we are today. This is where we want to be. Earlier, Prof was alluding to the journey taken, the difficult journey taken by Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore. We had the history of South Korea under Peng. We had the most difficult journey of the 1,000 steps by Deng Xiaoping in China from 1979 to 1989. There are a lot of examples all over the world. Currently, we have in Africa, we have Rwandan Paul Kagame. We have Joko Widodo in Indonesia. There are pockets of examples all over the world where at least leaders are now going back into the history. Nigeria doesn't have that particular, Nigeria should not be an exception. We must force ourselves collectively, both followership and rulership, to sit down on a round table and tell ourselves the bitter truth. Look, the age of pretensions are over. This is where we are today. This is where we're supposed to be in the next 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. All the vision that we have had in this country were not built on solid foundations. But on solid foundation. So, and we are a nation that is given to managing problems. We should now develop and graduate into a nation whereby we are serious with problem-solving methodologies. So, as long as we operate at that particular level of managing problems, we will never see we'll never reach our destination. So politically, I think we should equally define what sort of political system do you want to operate in Nigeria. Is democracy working? If yes, why is it failing intermittently? How do you solve those problems? If it is not working, what are the other options? Are we going back to parliamentarianism? Are we going to evolve? There is no crime if Nigeria evolves its own democratic system or political system. As
against copy and paste. As against copy and paste.
As against copy and paste. Even in America, they are having crisis with their democratic administration. So look, you ask Kagame, is Kagame practicing democracy? Certainly not. Are Rwandans happy? Of course. Go to Indonesia. Look at the economic growth steadily from Joko Widodo's miracle. Look, things are happening. But we in Nigeria, we celebrate democracy more, freedom more, rather than progress and prosperity. So we should tell ourselves the truth. We should take that decision. Do we want to have leaders in Nigeria, or we want to continue with these pretenders that call themselves rulers? It's not difficult. I pity President Tinubu. He doesn't have the magic wand of Moses. He doesn't have the brain, the wisdom of Solomon. But Nigerians, every problem in Nigeria, including your own feud between a husband and a wife, they want Tinubu to solve it. So we should change these values. Nigeria must change its values first. We must have a national value. What is our national value? What is our national culture? Then from these two, we integrate them and become a national agenda. Then from the national agenda, we must have a national policy, collective national policy, not from Adamawa, not Lagos, Sokoto, or Calabar. This is Nigerian. It is not about North or South, Islam or Christianity. What is the Nigerian agenda? From there, we have national policy that address Nigerians, wherever you are. From national policy, then we begin to say, what type of strategies are going to put in place to actualize this particular policy? So all these are lacking. These are gaps that no Nigerian man is willing and ready to address, because every very, very, very mischievous role on ourselves. We are enemies unto ourselves. So long as we don't tell ourselves the truth, we keep on jumping from one silly mistake to another one unavoidable mistakes in Nigeria, and the history goes on like this.
All right, let's quickly go back to Kano. Professor Yushao Ango, we lost contact with you briefly, but hopefully that's fully restored now. If you listen to Professor Abba here and the mini lecture that he just gave to us, I was busy taking notes. But let's look at it from the sub-nationals. Before we see leaders at the federal level, at the national level, in the center here, many of them are cooked and baked from the sub-nationals. They're getting it right even from that point before, getting them, to even bigger positions, to be able to drive some of these processes. And then when you, intervene on that line, I would also want to look at, you bringing in your expertise on board, how we begin to come out of some of the problems that we found ourselves in making well for ourselves, for the nation, the best version of itself in the shortest time possible. Prof, did you hear me? All right, I think we're still trying to fully establish, contact with Prof. Once we get our audio lines going, we'll be able to get Prof's intervention on that. But while we're there, Professor Adeni is here. You listen to... Yeah. All right, I think Prof can hear me. So, Prof, go ahead, please. All right, we'll relink Professor Ango very shortly. Let's hear from Professor Adeni. You heard from Professor Abba here and talking about, our pretensions towards getting, the right people in the right places, and looking at some of the templates and the, countries that we've seen being able to cross the bridge between concept and actuality, between dreams and reality. How do we establish? Because it seems to me, we've said that sacrifices have to be made on both sides of the aisle, followership and leadership, making some sacrifices. We're doing that also in our political, life.
No, of course, we're not doing it. Nobody believes that you should bear the card. Nobody believes that you should show the pathway towards a changed attitudinal disposition. The attitudinal disposition that we presently have is one of a disdain, for the entity called Nigeria. Everybody is looking for opportunity to pilfer, and that's why you see the frenetic craze, to be in government, because government is seen, government appointments, government positions are seen as the easiest way towards the making of material progress. But one thing we have to underscore is that there might be reason for us to be slightly celebratory about our democracy, which I think that Professor Abba harped upon. Yes, our democracy is 24 years down the line now. No doubt salutary at the level of longevity, but of course there are still questions around the character of our democracy, which is why there are issues around credibility and integrity of the electoral process, and which is why we also have the question of politicians, participants being die-harded, with contestation. They still feel very strongly that when they win, being magnanimous in victory will be difficult, and when they lose, being gallant in defeat will always be difficult. And that's why we see continuous results, to the courts. This is something that is likely going to continue, except our disposition towards public service changes. And how do we make it change? It's just, again, comes back to the question of attitude. But changing the attitude for the people is not a one-off thing. It's not something that requires a magic, that you can use a magic bullet to achieve. It takes a painstaking process, just like nation building. In building a nation, you have to be concerned about integrating the fragments, the compartmentalized parts, bringing them in, doing the right things, increasing their sense of belonging, following long period of longing. In changing attitude too, you have to be constantly reminding citizens of their responsibility to the nation, because they are not existing for themselves. They exist, yes, maybe to satisfy themselves at some level. But the greater level of satisfaction is often provided by government. Level of citizens considering their rights to the state, so that they can in turn protect them, consistent with the Leviathan. These things are not cast in stone. It just requires all hands to be on deck for people to know what they need to do and what they do not have to do. But in our system, we still have some of these things playing up because the right leaders, yes, have come in the past at different level. And when we're talking about these things, concentration shouldn't just be at maybe presidential leadership, for instance, but leadership across the ladder. And any leader can emerge at any point in time at different levels and become an example that people can refer to. We have seen it in the past, where we have agencies, leaders emerging at the level of agencies, leaders emerging at the level of state, being governors, and excelling. And we are often able to refer to them, when we see that they take decisions, without minding whose ox is God, without fear or favor, and making impact, leaving legacies behind. And of course, if we can have it in those sectors, in those sections, at one time or the other point, we could also have it replicated on a larger scale so that we can have greater impact. Remembering also that a good leader, or the kind of leader people want, can come from two ways, maybe deliberate process of the election, of bringing him in through the election process, through campaign issues, understanding the pedigree of the person, or through happenstance. You probably do not know that the person will be gung-ho, the person will be radical in fostering change, but you just bring the person in and you see him going, being forceful in effecting change. Yeah, but again, the one that we should concentrate on is to make sure that it is deliberate. And how do we make it deliberate? By being concerned about who we elect into positions of leadership. Understanding their past, situating them in the present, and rightly making projections into what they will probably do when they get into office. That's why the character of our democracy can grow, as the case could be.
All right, Professor Ango in our Kano studios have been angling to, make contribution of, in terms of the line of thoughts, the lines of thoughts that are being, echoed here in the studio. Professor Ango, first of all, we'll talk about the leadership recruitment processes, and we'll say, perhaps the gestation period must be at the subnationals, where we get the very best of them incubated. We push them to the center to drive our processes. Is that happening, or have we completely entrenched the rub my back, I rub your back syndrome, quid pro quo?
A lot will operate more. We have a vision. We know clearly where we're heading to. Regardless of the challenges, at least there is a perspective, there is a way you are looking at it, and everybody is aspiring, and we know collectively we are moving towards one destination. I think that is what we need. I know as a country we have had a lot of distractions, or here and there, trying to slow us down, but and we have the right leadership that will now give us a vision. Let us aspire to something. Let us all look forward to something. As a country, we have all it takes, like I said earlier. We have the human resources, we have the natural resources, we have the population, we have everything that should make us great. Everywhere Nigerians go to, in other countries, other climes, they excel. So there is no reason why, regardless of our differences, accepted as, by all, that we are all aspiring to, regardless of our different political parties. The approach may be different, but the goal should be clear to everyone. I think we need that. We need some visions that we can ascribe to, and then we need to clearly define from various political. I know that the internal democracy is an issue. How do you have a correct internal democracy within the parties that will bring out the best, not necessarily the richest, not necessarily the one that has more money, to emerge? Those kind of things are the kind of things we need. So more than anything, we need leadership with vision, leadership that will actually show us where we're heading to, and we all as a nation are willing to follow that kind of leadership, to arrive at a certain destination, regardless of these distractions, like I said.
Some insights, especially based on your expertise, the areas of your expertise, finance and entrepreneurship. The President alluded to, get the nation running and on an even keel. Looking at, issues of job creation, establishing domestic competencies in, value chain development in different sectors of the economy. Perhaps could you create a scenario where we can, begin to establish these linkages and make sure that we have, jobs for our teaming youths, and then perhaps we could see this restiveness perhaps go to a lower ebb?
Yes, like we have been saying over and over again, we have youth, and these youths are looking for something to do. They are interested, they want to add value. So whatever we need to do in this country is to ensure that we engage these youths actively, we get them to do something. So what I'm saying basically is probably we go back to some extent to the beginning of what we had at the beginning. At the beginning, at independence, what the country was striving for was, if you like, to reduce level of export, domestic production, to encourage domestic production so that we are able to produce what we normally will ordinarily import. That was the policy at the beginning. Now, I want us to bring back that policy, ensure that as a nation of trust, that anything imported is what is better, unlike what is supposed to be. So encourage local production, but this time around, we should add the element of export. We should also, in addition to what we are doing, take advantage of our position in the African economy. We are the largest economy in Africa. We are the largest country in Africa in terms of population. So take advantage of agreements, like the African Free Trade Agreement that we have all subscribed to, to ensure that our products, so things like that are required. But more than that, as a nation, just like China is the producer for, let's say, global producer of most commodities, then Nigeria, at least, if nothing, should be a major producer for Africa. Start from there. We should produce for ourselves and produce for Africa. And like we have been saying all along, whatever that can be produced in Nigeria, Nigerian government, at least, should not, patronize imported things that can be produced in Nigeria. We have given the example, for example, of vehicles. Why should official vehicles, that have been purchased, let's say by legislators or by the executive arm, be imported when there are Nigerians actually currently doing this? So whatever we can produce in Nigeria, furniture, whatever, anything like that, we should produce in Nigeria. That way, we're engaging the youth, we're engaging everybody, we're making everybody busy, and that way, our economy will be stronger, and then everybody will have a purpose, everybody will have something doing. But so long as this youth that we are producing and that are all over don't have anything to do, then of course they can now easily be attracted, to other, things that are not supposed to be. So as much as possible, what we should do is to produce what we have, just as we have been substantially producing our food now, so we should also produce our manufactured products. We should be producing our phones. We are one of the largest users, like I said, of telephone and IT facilities globally. So why are we not producing those? So whatever we need to do to encourage that, to encourage local production, and then to dominate, if possible, the local market. That is, I'm talking about not only Nigerian market, but West Africa and then Africa as a whole. I think we have the capacity, we have the ability, we can do that. And I think that is what will transform the Nigerian economy and make it, to be greater, in the years to come.
Very much, Prof. We'll take this story now. Nigeria's economic journey from independence to prosperity has seen significant challenges and opportunities. As the drivers of the economy continue to navigate through renewed hope, experts are of the view that sacrificial implementation of policies and programs devoid of corruption is a sure way to economic prosperity. Benny Adams has that report.
The Nigerian economy has been marked by massive changes in the last 6 decades. While modern Nigeria is dominated by agriculture and petroleum, efforts are being intensified towards diversifying the economy in line with global trends.
After the First Republic, those are our grandfathers. They did their best. The great Zik of Africa, the Awolu was, the Sardauna, the Makama of Bida, the Tafawa Balewas. I think what they had in mind was the country itself, not about materialism. But from 1983, when the army took over, till date, it has not been well because of corruption. Corruption has barely destroyed all the strata of the economy. There is no reason why Nigerians should be poor. Nigeria fed the whole Africa rice, the rice from Niger State. It fed this country, fed us, fed Africa. There were earnings of foreign exchange. Kaduna was busy producing maize, feeding Africa, feeding the whole country. Today, where is it?
From the Structural Adjustment Program of the military in 1986, which sought to, amongst other objectives, reduce dependence on the external sector and eliminate price distortions induced by overvalued currency, Nigeria has transitioned through administrations that centered on improving the macro governance reforms, with key policies of the reforms as privatization, deregulation, and commercialization. The president administration then decided to bite the bullet on the issue of subsidy.
The fresh subsidy is gone.
NMPC was carrying the subsidy burden for the whole federation until it became very obvious by the time Mr. President took over that it is no longer possible to proceed because you do not have the cash to pay for it, and NMPC could potentially go into negative cash flow. Another word for it is bankruptcy.
With subsidy out of the way and the unification of the exchange rate in effect, the road seemed cleared for more investment into the economy.
There was a time when government had enough foreign exchange, it had enough naira revenue to meet its obligations and to provide the funding for growth of the economy. It had enough foreign exchange such that when people came in to invest and they needed to import raw materials, to import machinery, government could provide the wherewithal. And so what that points to is that we have a situation where if government doesn't have the money, it needs to facilitate and allow private funding, other sources of funding, such as foreign direct investment, domestic investment by Nigerians in all areas.
In the railways, in agriculture, in ports, things that are critical to Mr. President's strategy for increasing our import substitution and export manufacturing.
A project of $3 billion we are declaring today. Of course, we'll be meeting government and different ministries in Abuja in times to come, and we will make a way out how to reach to that level.
Drivers of the economy also say more to increase government revenue to grow the economy.
The mandates given to us are divided into three broad pillars. One of it is fiscal governance. The second pillar that we have is revenue transformation. Beyond taxes, even non-tax revenue, how can you optimize it? And Mr. President has said over the next, in the next 3 years, we want to get to about 18% tax to GDP ratio. And on the other hand, we want to reduce the number of more. But it's easy to explain because we know including harmonization of how those taxes are collected.
In all of this, the digital and blue economy are fast contributing to the nation's economic growth.
So Nigeria is on its way to becoming a superpower because technology runs the world and we have the engine to help the world power this new development.
Medicine plants now require more of cow dung and other organic substances that are coming from animals. Now, to top it all, the human population keeps on growing, and so the success of every government is now weighed on the availability of food, not necessarily on how expensive it is. It's more dependent now on whether the food is even available.
Looking back to 2015, when the Anko Borers program was initiated, more than 3 million smallholder farmers benefited by cultivating 3.8 million hectares of land.
Since when we have started participating in Anko Borers program, there is a tremendous achievements and there is a progress. Even the challenges were solved because through Anko Borers program, a farmer, after capturing his data, even his farm will be mapped. So we know the actual and the accurate measurement of his farm. Secondly, he will get the quality inputs, he will get the required services, he will get good agronomic practice, even the emotional evaluation of what a technology that was introduced in this program. And then also, above all these, any collateral, any into him. So now farmer, he has an